Our first lesson focuses on leadership. So, this is the time to challenge yourself about what attracts you to a potential leader. We're going to look at a number of different areas in this video: experience, expertise, charisma, policy, and vision. And we're also going to touch on the theme of bias. So, you've looked at the statements and what each candidate has used to suggest themselves. Some of those candidates focus on their experience. Some of them have been leaders before. Ashley is a good example of this. She was the CEO of a significant financial business. We can compare this with the business backgrounds of some of our current well-known politicians. But let's have a think about the relevance of this experience. Do you think it applies to a society in which business does not, at least for now, exist as it used to? Do the concerns of the business world reflect those of the ordinary people in the community? Is this kind of leadership transferable? Did the leaders of the past, those with similar backgrounds, do the things that you feel that this new society needs? Is leadership in business ever relevant directly to leadership in politics? Well, we also have career politicians. So Nigel's another candidate that we might consider here. He's been a politician before. He's had a career in local politics. He's got an awareness of the sorts of things that a society like yours requires: infrastructure, resource distribution, and so on. But is this enough? Do you see anything else in his statement that makes him seem like the leader you're in need of? And then there's life experience. As well as career experience, some candidates mentioned their life experience. Is this something that might in fact be more relevant in this current situation? Consider Esther and her versatility in the face of unexpected situations, or Omar with his resilience as an immigrant who built a life from scratch. Crossing over with experience is expertise. To take an example from our lives in the UK at the moment, does it matter whether a Minister for Education has a background working in education? Does it matter whether a health minister looks after their own health and fitness? So let's start with relevant education. Some might consider that a degree, such as PPE, Politics, Philosophy and Economics, might be helpful in pursuing political leadership. So we might consider Stephanie, who is studying for a politics degree, or Barclay, who brings his academic background in philosophy to the table. And on the other hand, there's skills. Do the circumstances in which you find yourselves in this game mean that there are other forms of education that matter more than traditional academic pathways? There's Charles with his foraging, and Gav the builder, for example. However, even though these are valuable skills, are they relevant to decision-making and leadership overall? Other candidates have transferable skills that may be more appropriate. What about Samira's analytical mind, or Veronique's intelligence and maths ability? I think many people would argue that charisma and personality have become more important for a successful politician in recent years, though others would say that this has contributed to the rise in populism and the success of leaders such as Donald Trump and Boris Johnson. From the opposite point of view, a lot of people seem to find Keir Starmer boring and Rishi Sunak fake, and consider these to be downsides in themselves. Some of our candidates focus on their personality type in their statements. So Tina talks about being a people person. Danielle and Evie talk about their caring characters and the vocations these have led to. What sort of personality do you think makes a good leader? For others, their personalities come through in the way that they address their statements, and this might be appealing for a leader. Austin might seem particularly engaging and friendly. Likewise, Jimmy. But does it matter if a leader is likeable? Charisma is the sort of compelling attractiveness that seems to encourage others to follow an individual. So is this what you're looking for? We have Inda, for example, whose life as an influencer suggests that she has that kind of quality. Maybe Jay, as a successful musician, resonates something similar. But you might want to contrast that with somebody like John Paul, whose statement is brief and simple, perhaps lacking charisma, but with a clear direction in terms of policy. Did you notice that most of the characters focus on their personality and experience rather than on policy in their statements? Have a think about where you saw a focused proposal, or at least an area of concern that would be central to the direction the candidate would want your society to go. Let's go back to John Paul. He's very clear about his priority: security. He doesn't spell out what this would mean in practice, but at least you know where his focus would lie. Gav hints at his priorities too, by saying that the practical concerns come first, most obviously with respect to what needs to be built, i.e. his priority might be housing and amenities. Then there are a number of candidates who mention children. Jimmy puts children at the summit of his statement, and his belief in making a better world for children is also reflected by his experience, that is, his youth work in the past. He may not specify what he would do in practice, but his priority is evident. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it's mainly the parents of young children who mention the importance of their children's futures, such as Stephanie and Alison. But is this relevant to the wider concerns of the community in the here and now? We might compare these examples with Tom's statement, in which his concern for young people is evident, but it's only one part of his reasons that he thinks he'd be a good leader. He draws together his experience as a leader and in crisis management, his expertise in education, and he hints at a vision, even if he doesn't give specific policies. It's probably unsurprising that in such an extreme scenario as our game implies, that vague vision appears more commonly than specific policies. But that might be something you value when considering what society should be like if you were starting afresh. There are a number of candidates who talk about a better future, including Charles and Sophie, though Inda suggests it's about rebuilding things as they were, while June Min rejects the society of the past as a failure. Optimism about a better future is in contrast with Cassie's pessimistic attitude. She only wants to prevent the descent of humanity into amoral horror. However, other candidates are more specific. There's Gareth, who blames toxic masculinity for the failures of the past. Mary Elizabeth, who points out the failure to address the climate crisis. Brad thinks the very concept of government is at fault, though he does fail to suggest a clear alternative. Cecilia's vision for the future centralises her religious beliefs. Then there's Berkeley, who is more concrete about the sort of society he would want. He's prioritising justice and freedom, and that might be opposed to John Paul's focus, which is on security. We see something similar from Evie, who stresses the possibility for an inclusive society where the sick and disabled are no longer ostracised. So we've touched there on experience and expertise, personality, and policies and vision. But there is a final aspect that we need to consider, and that's unconscious bias. Do you have an unconscious idea of what a leader should look like? Challenge yourself to consider whether you've discounted anyone because you considered them too young or too old without reason beyond that. June Min points out that he has no dependents. Others deliberately highlight the fact that they are parents. Does either of those affect your decision? What about race? Particularly if you're white, have you unconsciously cast your future leader as white? And given that a majority of politicians in the UK are men, did you unconsciously favour anyone solely because of their gender? Take this opportunity to revisit the decisions that you think you've achieved. What is it that led you to those decisions? Do you need to be critical of the parameters that you're putting in place for choosing a leader? What is it that you're really looking for?